Pro Football Focus releases their top 50 NFL players for 2023. And to no surprise to anybody listening to this podcast, there was a whole bunch of San Francisco 49ers. What did they get right? What did they get wrong? And former 49ers quarterback, Hall of Famer Steve Young, has something very interesting to say about Brock Purdy and why he was so good in his NFL debut as a rookie. Oh, that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making this your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there, and make sure you are one. Subscribe up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Croc, what do you think about this top 50 list from the best players in the NFL from Pro Football Focus? And Sam Monson, the author of this thing, and I don't think it should be a surprise to anybody out there to see names like Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Donald at 1 and 2, but it didn't take long for a San Francisco 49ers player to show up on the list, and that was Trent Williams, the guy that broke the grading system for PFF last year. He's so good.
Can we talk about Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch's ability to not only identify talent, because a lot of people can just see talented guys, but identify fit, right? Like, how does this guy fit with what we do? And not just fit, like guys that fit at the highest level. You know, I've talked about Richard Sherman and his ability, right? We're talking about a guy 4'5'7", not the fastest guy, having to play cornerback. But when you're drafted in the 5th round, it's like, okay, you know, we'll kind of see what this guy can do. He's a converted receiver. And he goes to the Seattle 3 scheme, and he just fits, right? Just fits like a blanket, like a glove. And it just works all the way to him being a Hall of Famer. And when you look at these guys for the 49ers, you know, Trent Williams, trading for him, he might have fit anywhere. And Nick Bosa might have fit anywhere. But Fred Warner, Deebo Samuel, you know, Christian McCaffrey, to the extent in which he fits with the 49ers and what they do. I think that's the special part of it. And I think when you see those guys on that list, again, the first thing I thought of was, man, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch really good at identifying what fits for the way that they want to build their team.
And even when they've had some misses, it's because they're chasing that fit in a lot of ways. Guys like Jalen Hurd.
Who just signed with the New England Patriots.
Yeah, I saw that. Was it Patriots? I thought it was...
He had a workout with someone else, but then he had a workout with the Texans, but he signed with the Patriots.
Okay. And that shows you that the Texans brass, D'Amico Ryans, Bobby Slowick, liked what they saw in San Francisco enough to at least see how his knee was doing and put him through a workout. But he ends up signing with the New England Patriots. Okay. That's an interesting one.
That would have been an interesting fit. Like, if his issue, again, being able to identify talent. I think they were able to identify the talent and the fit, but just not the injuries. Like that was the part that didn't quite mesh. But I was just talking to someone, this is fresh on my mind, like just his ability and just kind of visualizing how that would fit in the Kyle Shanahan's offense. Man, we look at Juwan Jennings and what he does. Hurd at almost 6'5", 230 pounds is like a jumbo-sized version of that. With his blocking ability, and he got in fights because he was so aggressive during training camp. I mean, but he was twitched up for underneath in those free releases. Man, he would have ate. He would have ate.
Yeah, former running back, running out of catch, that big slot position. You could kind of probably move him around in some ways. How I call Juwan Jennings more of a tight end almost than a wide receiver at times. I think that was the role for Jalen Hurd. Yeah, and ended up going to Juwan Jennings. One of the things with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch is how competitive they are. And if there's a guy like Trent Williams who's the best in the league at his position, they're gonna talk about it. Like John's gonna say, dude, this is the best dude, Kyle. And Kyle like coached him before, and Kyle will be like, hell yes, go get him. And they will work hard to make that happen. We saw it with Christian McCaffrey. And again, with both these players, there was a connection there between Kyle Shanahan and those players. And so they know enough about them. They know they're the right fit. And so they attack it really hard and they go get that player. And so I think the aggressiveness is sometimes, I think I've accused John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan with a lot of their misses in the draft, especially being maybe a little bit naive in the way they go about things. And they were new. They were both, new to their positions. They'd never been head coach and GM before they got those jobs in 2017 with the 49ers. And they've learned some things. They learned some things with the injuries. Jalen Hurd and Javon Kinlaw, they were both hurt through the draft process, right? That those injuries weren't a new thing. And I think they're kind of learning about that now too. It's like, okay, we can't take chances on this because hurt college player means hurt NFL player. But they're really aggressive in going after those players that are really good and do fit. And I don't think 49ers fans should be surprised anymore if the 49ers go out and land big fish. And they did it again with Javon Hargrave in the offseason.
Now his fit is going to be very interesting, right? To see exactly like how does he fit? What do they see his role being? I mean, it sounds like kind of a 3-tech or maybe even like a 0 at times, but however they use him, and I think this is where maybe sometimes I give the 49ers too much credit for damn near every move that they make, but I'm always in my head thinking like, well, yeah, they'll figure it out. They'll figure out how to utilize them. And there's some guys where they could figure out how to utilize them. You talked about Jalen Hurd, and we know it's more injuries, but Solomon Thomas. And I know he dealt with some off the field stuff with tragic events, and those are always really to deal with. I lost my father when I was with the Jets, and I remember what that did to me mentally. Really kind of had me checking out for a minute. But overall, they couldn't really figure out like, okay, where does Solly work best? We want him to play in, and physically he's gifted to be able to do that, but that's not really a skill set. So let's put him inside, and never really figured it out. Yeah. So we have seen those misses as well, where they are maybe trying a little too hard, and maybe they should kind of go away from. Maybe they should go away from, I guess, at the top of drafts, just go more talent.
Yes.
Over scheme. Right. I mean, because think it.
Draft talent at the top. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, Kinlaw. Yeah, but I mean, even Mike McGlinchey, and he was good, but it was like, man, you got all pros that you passed up on because you didn't just go talent. You went more fit with. He's a good run blocker, and he can get out on the move and all that instead of just going, well, Minka Fitzpatrick's are arguably the best defender in this draft. Derwin James is really a special safety. Like doesn't matter what scheme those guys are in. Like they're going to be ballers regardless.
And if I remember correctly, I think John Lynch a couple years after that draft was asked about it, and I think he did mention that Derwin James was the best grade for him.
Oof.
So he would have been the pick, I think. I would have to go find that. Listeners out there, let us know if you can find that clip. That's at BD Peacock, at Eric_Crocker. Find us on all the socials. Drop a comment on YouTube. Croc, we're going to get a little deeper into this PFF list. It didn't take very long for the next 49er to show up either after Trent Williams at number 3. And that is not to anybody's surprise, Nick Bosa. Where is Christian McCaffrey on this list? And a ton of San Francisco 49ers make the top 50, according to Pro Football Focus, in the NFL this season. Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. And I know everyone needs a little bit of help, and sometimes you need that little map to go forward in your life. And sometimes you are a little uncertain about where you are, where you're going, where you want to be, what is the right path to get there, and how to get through it all and navigate the choices in your life. We're always faced with tough choices every single day, and the path forward isn't always clear. Whether you're dealing with decisions around career, relationships, just about anything else, therapy helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life. Croc just talked about losing his father while he's in training camp with the Jets, the biggest opportunity of his life, and then that gets matched with the biggest life event of losing a parent. And how hard is that to get through? And he talked about how he checked out, and everybody needs some therapy sometimes to help you get through those types of life moments. And trusting yourself to make the decisions that align with your values, like anything else, the more you practice, the easier it gets. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. In some ways, Croc, maybe even disrespectful to have Nick Bosa all the way down at number 6. I think Nick Bosa, I've said it before, is the most important player to the San Francisco 49ers. Is he better necessarily than Trent Williams is at his position? No. And he's not the...
You don't think so?
I think Trent Williams is probably the best player at his position on the 49ers. But I think Nick Bosa is a more impactful player because of the position he plays. And I would pick, if I was drafting of 49ers, I would pick Nick Bosa 1.1.
I think also this is, PFF, which some of the things are a little bit more analytically driven. And we all know the season that Trent Williams just had, which is crazy. Trent Williams, we look at him as he's just the best, right? And it's like, dang, he's getting old. But it just doesn't feel like it because you don't see any drop off in his play. Like the only thing you have to worry about is those 2 games that he's just likely going to miss because he just doesn't play full seasons. But outside of that, I mean, he's terrific. So when I say, better than, Nick Bosa, like Nick Bosa is at the peak of his powers. He may never be better than what he'll be this season, right? Like just at his peak. Yeah. And Trent Williams is like, is this dude still peaking?
It's interesting because with Nick Bosa's physically talented, but he's not as freaky as the guy right in front of him at number 5. So Nick Bosa come in at number 6 on the top 50. Right ahead of him is the first edge rusher. Number 5 is Myles Garrett. And when you see them both walk in the room, you would say, I'll probably choose Myles Garrett. And Nick Bosa is not as fast. He's not as long. He's not as tall. He's probably not as powerful. But, man, his technique is so good, and he maximizes everything he gets out of his body. And I would probably say that Trent Williams is probably more like Myles Garrett, where he was just more freakishly talented, and we could see Myles Garrett continue to get better and better and better. And I still don't think we've maybe seen the best of Myles Garrett either. So maybe Myles Garrett's career arc is more like Trent Williams was, whereas Bosa just came out of the blocks as a rookie. Can you remember seeing a rookie that impactful and just that good from day one as Nick Bosa was?
You've talked a lot about the record with, Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Or you say, people talk about the record with Jimmy G, and they're like, well, look at Nick Bosa's record, like when he's on the field, because it's even better than Garoppolo's record. So, yeah, clearly super impactful, and he's been impactful every time he stepped on the field with the 49ers. More impactful than Myles Garrett? I'd say he's been on better teams. We're gonna find out a lot about Myles Garrett this year because this might be the best team heading into the season that he's had with Deshaun Watson being there now for 2 seasons, but got to play some games. Okay, he has a full offseason. You have Chubb in the background. In the backfield. He's arguably the best running back in the NFL. To some they might say he is like the best between him, Josh Jacobs, Christian McCaffrey. They got receiver Amari Cooper. They got another 2 receivers with Peoples-Jones, and there's one other one that's like solid. So they have, this might be the best. Denzel Ward on at corner, Greg Newsome on the other side. Like this might be their most talented team. So we're gonna find out, like, is he Nick Bosa, or because Nick Bosa just been good. That's all we know is him being good, and all we know is 49ers winning with Nick Bosa on the field.
I don't know enough about Myles Garrett personally, but I almost get the feeling he's a little too nice.
He is he's one of those
from who's the quarterback that he beat over the head with his helmet? Was
it was Rudolph, Kyle Rudolph, Kyle Rudolph. Rudolph, though, Randolph. Rudolph.
Right. Yeah.
From Oklahoma State.
Yes.
So, but aside from that, he's a very so he's freakish. I don't know if you've ever seen him play basketball.
He's he's one of those true freaks of nature, and there's a lot of them in the NFL. Just unreal, like rolled out of bed at 15 years old, and you see him in high school, and it's like, what? How the heck can this guy be playing the same field with these other kids? It's like completely unfair. It's just nuts. Like whatever DNA. He was like a science experiment where he just got like the extra DNA thing, and all of a sudden, but then got shipped off somewhere, and we never heard about him. And do you remember? Did you ever see the '80s movie Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny?
Right, yeah,
that's what he is. He's like the. I wonder if there's like some other guy who got the rough end of the stick with the DNA, and it all went to Myles Garrett.
Yeah, he has like this scrawny little brother. Now, the one thing that's different about him, right? Because you see him and he's like this big monstrous person. You talked about him being a little nice. He likes that one stuff. The anime. He's super into anime.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this big 6'5", 275, 280 pound all muscle guy that's like wants to know about Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z.
Little nerd. I like it though. I like it. He's a little nerd in him. Fred Warner comes in at number 14, the third San Francisco 49er in the top 50, an 85.7 overall grade last year from Pro Football Focus, is good across the board, and he allowed a 88.8 passer rating into his coverage, which was more than 15 points lower than the average at the linebacker position. And generally, targeting linebackers in the passing game is pretty fruitful for teams, and it's really the way the league has gone.
With linebackers in coverage, it's always kind of weird to me because, especially depending on the system, like it's not like they're a man coverage cornerback who is like, all right, hey, you have him. And then, they throw it to the guy and you either break up the pass or you give up a catch. A lot of linebackers, especially with the 49ers, is kind of dropping into a zone, kind of spot dropping, keeping things in front of you. Okay, they caught the ball. Let me rally down and make a tackle. So it's hard for me on the grading scale with some of these, LBs, how they do it. I say the same thing with nickels too. Nickels, the same thing. They do a lot of spot dropping, keep things in front of them, rally down, make a tackle. So the completion percentage against Jimmy Ward is probably going to be higher than the completion percentage for an outside corner like Travarius Ward or even Diamador Lenore. It's just kind of the way there's kind of set up in the middle of the field with those guys, a lot of ground and cover. So I don't hold it against any linebacker that might have a higher passer rating against him, but just seeing the impact of Fred Warner, and clearly PFF feels it and understands it as well. His ability to turn and run with anyone, some of the things they ask him to do out in space against speedy receivers, vertically pushing down the field, and then him running sideline to sideline. And I don't even think that's his biggest impact. I think his biggest impact is the attitude he brings on a play-to-play basis. And I just see that energy permeate throughout the rest of the defense, where it's like almost infectious to where we've seen Dre Greenlaw. And I think Dre Greenlaw, sometimes takes it a little bit overboard, but we see them just take on that same mindset as well. It might have started with Quan Alexander. I think that might have been where it's like, hey, we all play with Quan. We see how Quan plays. He plays with a certain level of tenacity, energy. Fred Warner picked up on it. Greenlaw picked up on it. But I think that's the biggest, probably one of the biggest compliments. You talk about be a football player. Man, he looks like a football player out there. I just love the way Fred Warner plays.
The Hot Boys.
The Hot Boys. I missed it.
We have George Kittle showing up at number 39 on the list. And Travis Kelce was number 4, I think. And so I don't know, man. I think it's closer between the two, but clearly Travis Kelce a better receiver. But how about this? Last year, passes thrown Kittle's way generated a passer rating of 140 for his quarterback. We saw a lot of that with Brock Purdy, we'll talk about in a minute, throwing the ball George Kittle's way. Kyle, 12 targets a game for George Kittle.
I think a lot of that was the lack of targets that he gets, and then the influx in touchdowns that he caught. So, and a lot of it was off of kind of like late and down, broken plays from Brock Purdy. Not even just, I'm just drawing up this play, I'm just going to throw it to George Kittle. It's like, all right, let me kind of look, okay, go through my read, okay, like let me move around, boom, let me hit George Kittle for a touchdown. And I think, Kittle's like, hell yeah, keep doing some more of that. And when you look at Travis Kelce, you talked about him being at number 4. Well, how does he get a lot of his work? How does he get a lot of his targets? A lot of his broken plays where it's just like, I'm supposed to be running this way, but then Mahomes moved this way, so I'm just going to scramble that way. You can't really cover that. I'm going to catch the ball. And then he's really good kind of after the catch, which is kind of weird how he does it, because it's like he's not just faster than everybody, but he kind of slithers through a little bit, and all of a sudden he's in the end zone. It's really weird. But I think George Kittle, he might be able to benefit by a quarterback that can move better back there. Whether it's, I mean, it could be any of the 49er quarterbacks, but guys that aren't just stationary to where the play has to be in rhythm. I think now him being able to add that kind of playmaking ability with Brock, with Trey, with Sam Darnold, I think that might help him move up a little bit more on this list.
What if? So yeah, basically what you're saying is if Travis Kelce had to continue playing with Alex Smith at quarterback, or he was playing with Garoppolo and George Kittle had a different quarterback, say Patrick Mahomes, we might see a little bit of different receiving numbers from those guys.
I think we would see one of the best tight ends of all time if you put George Kittle with Mahomes.
I don't disagree.
And not just because it's Mahomes, it's just his style, his play style.
Play style. It works for a tight end who's able to get open and
he's so fluid. He's an underrated route runner. It has something to do with the offense too. And I get it. He's a tremendous blocker. But I mean, he's really kind of an undersized tight end from a weight standpoint. Yeah, and then when you watch him, you watch his workout stuff, he looks like a receiver.
Yeah, he is. That's what he is, a bulked up wide receiver. You know who else is a wide receiver? Practically, that's Christian McCaffrey. He comes in at number 44. He led the league in PFF receiving grade at running back with a 92.4 receiving grade. They said he was virtually unstoppable within the offense because of that. But I think he doesn't rank as high because his running grades weren't as high as other players like Derrick Henry and some others in the NFL at the position. But I was surprised to see Christian McCaffrey as low as 44. I mean, as many 49ers are on this list. Nobody has 6 49ers in the top 50, but I don't know. Maybe we're nitpicking that this list that some guys like Christian McCaffrey could have been even higher.
I would say if you would have told me that, you know, McCaffrey and Fred Warner were flip-flopped, I would be like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. McCaffrey at 14 and Fred Warner at 44. So, yeah, it does feel a little low for Christian McCaffrey, especially because of his impact. But you talked about the rushing, and there were several games where he was averaging like less than 4 yards per carry, which isn't ideal. But then he'd have like these explosive games. And then he'd have, you know, a lot of catches in the game where he'd have 6 catches or 5 catches. So, but from just a pure running standpoint, there was a conversation, I know you and I talked about it, where it's like, Elijah Mitchell kind of looks like the better runner of the two, but you know, even though I mean, there were those games where, you know, you could have that conversation. Obviously, I mean, Elijah Mitchell averaged 6 yards a carry, but it was, you know, when he was just running the rock, he looked good, he looked sweet, he's picking up yards, and then you look at the box score, and I'm not to be a box scout type guy, but it's like, dang, McCaffrey averaged less than 4 yards per carry, and then you see Elijah Mitchell doing what he's doing, and it's like, it's just a little interesting. So, but then he have a game where he's explosive, and then he had a run like he did in the NFC Championship game where he's just like, forget it, I'm just gonna put the team on my back and run through 5 guys into the end zone. So clearly he's a special runner, but I don't think it was as consistent as we think, you know, from a game to game basis. There were some times where him and Mitchell active at the same time, which was few and far in between. I think Mitchell only played 5 games, but there were some times where it was like Mitchell was the one kind of finishing off games, and he had the good yards per carry, and maybe teams were worn down, but he just in those moments, in those games, it looked like Mitchell might be the better just runner, but McCaffrey clearly just the better football player.
Christian McCaffrey, wide back. Speaking of Croc, the 6th and final 49er on PFF's top 50 next, plus what Steve Young had to say about young Brock Purdy next. Thank you once again, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts, and check out the rest of the network has to offer, like the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Myself and former NFL scout Matt Williamson breaking down the entire league daily. I like seeing this one because I think Deebo Samuel is so unique. It's hard to put him in a category, and he deserves to be in the PFF top 50. And he did show up on this list at number 50. And as Sam Monson puts, and I wish we could have had Sam Monson on the show. We were actually trying to get him on, and it didn't work out because last week we were on vacation, Croc. But Deebo Samuel, one of one, a unique player that has also found the perfect coach to maximize his talents. He led the league led wide receivers in the NFL with 36 broken tackles last year. And that was him playing by his own admission, awful and out of shape last year. So I can't wait to see Deebo. And speaking of camp, I think that's what's going to be one of the talking points in camp this year is Deebo being in shape. He had a nice little workout photo the other day, and we talked about how this part of the season is like, he's been in the lab. He did look pretty lean, and that's a great sign for the 49ers.
He looks leaner. I talked about
he looks
before we came on here,
big, but it didn't look like there was extra weight on him. Put it that way.
Before we came on here, you and I were talking a little bit about working out, and I talked about how I can work out by myself, but the intensity isn't quite there. Just with kind of pushing myself those extra, few reps, and I'm like looking for that. I need that to become the best version of me physically. It looks like Deebo has been working out, but I do think that there's someone who can challenge the intensity of his workouts so that he truly becomes the best physical version of himself. So that's not to say that he looks bad right now. I mean, I'm judging off of a few still shots, photos, but I always remember rookie Deebo and what he looked like, and he was just a little leaner, So regardless, I mean, we saw him last year, and you talked about not being the best version of himself, but still being a special talent, and statistically not quite there. Missed some games, only had around 600 yards with 2 passing touchdown receptions. That doesn't sound like a Deebo Samuel season, especially coming off of a almost 1,800 yard, 14 touchdown season. But if he's anything better, just consistently on the field, I mean, I see him like far surpassing any numbers that he put up last year. And if you told me that he doesn't have 1,200 yards at the end of the year, 1,200 yards, 8 pass catching touchdowns, I'd be surprised.
Just receiving, you're talking.
Just receiving.
And that's with a few hundred other maybe rushing yards.
1,200 yards. And I get the not a whole lot of balls to go around, but I think because of his style and how you utilize him, and I want to say nobody caught more passes within like 2 yards of the line of scrimmage than Deebo Samuel last year, or his like average depth of target was like crazy low. That's fine, but just get the ball in his hands because he can take that 80 yards. And I think he's going to have a lot of those type of opportunities. I do think that he's still, and again, we'll see. Anyone that's listening to this right now, the thing I'm going to be looking for as it pertains to Deebo Samuel is what I used to say with one of my older co-hosts, Rob Louder, shout out to Rob Louder, but do wide receiver things. And I get it, he's a wide back, but just really tighten up on the route running vertically down the field. And I think Kyle Shanahan, a lot of times, if he doesn't feel like you're doing those things, he's going to use you in this drastically different way. And I think that's why we saw so many passes near or at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage for Deebo. But show Kyle that, like, dude, I can really, really work these 10 to 20 yards like I did when I was a rookie, because he was doing that. I was watching some highlights from his rookie year against Seattle, and he was running like 20-yard comeback, work back to the ball, caught the ball, cut up field, broke 5 tackles. I'm like, whew, he looked different. So I would love to see that version of him. I know he has it in him, and he talked about last year not being a great year for him, but I want to see that. I hope what we're gearing up for is 2019, even 2021, but really more so 2019 version of Deebo. I think as a pure receiver, that was probably still the best version of him.
Steve Young said something interesting about Brock Purdy that really stood out to me, being somebody who grew up watching Star Wars, especially, but hearing Steve Young talk about Brock Purdy and saying that it's the force. He's got the force in him. And this is something that I love hearing a Hall of Fame quarterback say it, because I think there's something that is special about certain players and people, and especially at quarterbacks, because all the mistakes that are made at quarterback with all these first round picks that don't turn out, they're tall and they're athletic and they've got a big arm, right? It helps to have those things, but that is not it playing quarterback in the NFL. And Steve Young knew it, and it took him a while to figure it out. We saw it with Joe Montana for years, right? Brock Purdy is strong. The force is strong with Brock Purdy. I think that's a really interesting way to look at Brock Purdy, and it's helpful to look at it that way, because it's a lot easier to say, you know what, all the rest of the stuff, it's important, but it doesn't matter as much as this. And if the force is strong with you, you've got an advantage over everybody else.
I think the biggest force that I think makes him a little bit different than some of the other guys that might be kind of physically like him with some of the same mental makeup is that he has the ability to make plays off script. And I think that's the difference maker there. I don't know if from a processing standpoint, throwing the ball, arm strength, the way he sees the field, like, is it better than Nick Mullins? Like, I think Nick Mullins, it was just how he prepared all those things. Like, he truly understood. They say he was the smartest quarterback in the room, and he was able to make those throws and do those things. It led him to be have the third most passing yards in his first 16 starts ever.
Right.
Like there's only two other quarterbacks that have more passing yards in their first 16 starts than Nick Mullins.
It was like Mahomes, Peyton Manning, Nick Mullins or something like
Nick Mullins, of course, right? And the difference between the two really is more so Mullins was kind of a statue. He was a statue in the pocket. And when you look at Brock Purdy, where maybe something might not be there or he's not a little comfortable in it, he doesn't have to panic and throw the ball and potentially throw an interception. He makes moves and he's able to make guys miss and he's able to throw off platform and do all those things. And I think that's the biggest difference maker in my opinion. So, I mean, you could say the force is strong and all that type of stuff that Steve Young was talking about, but I see somebody who has figured out how to play within his skill set, and it has allowed him to be very efficient in the offense with a lot of playmakers and Kyle Shanahan, and then do that little extra that is needed to be probably what he was, which was an undefeated quarterback. Now, can you hold that up? I don't know, but you talked about some of the guys that might be more talented, right? Like the big, strong, fast, big arm quarterbacks. And I think the difference with those guys is they can luck into an MVP season, which you know, like a Cam Newton or even like a Jalen Hurts, who is like, up for MVP, where he's not the purest of throwers, but it was like, man, I can kind of figure out how to get by because I'm just physically gifted at these things. I'm not sure that Brock is that, but whatever he is, when you talk about that force that is with him, it's a match with Kyle Shanahan. And I think that's what makes the force so strong. The work ethic, the leadership, and then just that added ability to move and make plays. And that's the difference. To me, that's really the difference between him and Nick Mullins. I'm gonna get a lot of slack.
He's Nick Mullins with mobility. I can't wait. At Eric_Crocker on Twitter. What's your Threads handle? What's your Instagram?
I don't know. But I will say this. I don't think Nick Mullins is a bad quarterback. Like, I think Nick Mullins was in more of a bad situation. Like, he was playing, you didn't have the number one defense. You had Nick Bosa hurt week 2. You didn't have a healthy Deebo. You didn't have a healthy George Kittle. Even Trent Williams had missed games that year. So it's like what Nick Mullins was working with wasn't as ideal. So I don't think Nick Mullins is bad. I think we would have seen a better version of Nick Mullins if he had a full deck of cards, or even if it just give me the number one defense to where I don't have to force these things and turn the ball over, and just George Kittle and then Christian McCaffrey, and I'll be good. Just give me those guys. I don't even need Deebo. Okay, I got Ayuk. I'm gonna throw the ball to him and Kendrick Bourne.
Maybe that's the force. Maybe the force is having Trent Williams and Kyle Shanahan and Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk.
But that's not fun. Like, that's not there. It's not fun to say that. I think the outsiders, if you ask, here's the thing. If you ask other people, right, like not anybody associated with the 49ers, ask other people, like, man, what do you think about Nick Mullins? I'm about to call Nick Mullins. Brock Purdy, man, he won every game as a starter.
Well, you remember what Matt Williamson, my co-host for the Peacock and Williamson NFL show, we were talking about that week 1 matchup, the Steelers and the 49ers. And he was like, I would take Kenny Pickett all day over Brock Purdy. I would love to see Kenny Pickett with Kyle Shanahan's offense, with Trent Williams blocking for him, with Deebo Samuel, with basically all the things I just said. And I was like, well, Brock Purdy played a lot better than Kenny Pickett. Both of them as rookies. One was the first quarterback drafted. One was the last quarterback drafted. I would personally take Brock Purdy because I haven't seen anything special out of Kenny Pickett. I didn't really see anything special about him as a college player either. But that was sort of the argument from Williamson, and I understand that argument.
I think that would be the argument for most people. Now, what Steve Young said, right? And I'm going to kind of cover my tracks a little bit so people don't kill me too much. He said that, hey man, I'm not going to set any limitations on this guy. Like there's no limitations. Just let him cook. And I think that with this team, Brock Purdy will be able to cook. I think you can let him loose, and I think he can cook with this team. And that's not a slight at him. I mean, it's just so far what I see. Now, we're talking about, I'm talking about a rookie, right? I mean, and I know he's going into his second year. He was a rookie last year. So it's not what I'm seeing right now isn't the final, it's not even the final version of what he potentially can be. I mean, like anybody else, we would say, man, this is just the start. So in 2 years from, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when he truly understands it, and he truly gets what he's seeing from opposing defenses, and he truly has that mastered, like what does Brock Purdy look like then? And that can be a very special quarterback. That could be a Drew Brees. So there's still, I mean, there's a really lot to like. When you start talking about that force, I can see why somebody where it's like, man, limited action, didn't even get in the offseason, didn't really, get any reps until, because even as backup quarterback, you ain't getting no reps in practice. You're getting reps on scout team. So, finally getting some first team reps, and it's like, man, he came in and did some very special things and played very well. So I'm excited to see if he can continue it. Again, I still think it's Nick Mullins that can move, but I like Nick Mullins. And I think that's the difference between Nick Mullins being a backup quarterback and still a backup in the NFL and was a good backup for the 49ers, and Nick Mullins being a potential starter. He can't move. He's more of a statue. Brock Purdy has that, and I think that has allowed him to really excel in this Kyle Shanahan offense. Good stuff, Brock Purdy.
So if Brock Purdy cooks, he's gonna be like a chef. Does that make him Wolfgang Brock? Maybe could that be a nickname? That's good. We got to workshop that one. That's not gonna cut it. Plus, Russell Wilson already did the cooks thing. I think we got to.
I know. That's why when I heard Steve Young say that, I was like, yeah.
No, we don't cook. We don't cook in San Francisco. We grill out.
I hope that people, when they hear me say this, they just look at it from a different perspective. Not that Croc thinks that.
They're not even hearing this part. They already cut out to. They're typing away at you right now.
Right now, huh?
They're not going to.
They've already said it. Croc. Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins.
I got a new mixer. I don't have the button right now. I got to get that back.
Nick Mullins. I think Nick Mullins is good. I think he's a good backup. I think if he could move, he might be a starter. Third most yards in the first 16 starts in the history of the NFL. Don't be talking bad about Nick Mullins.
All right. Find us on the socials. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen. Let Croc know what you think about his comments about Brock Purdy being mobile Nick Mullins. And we'll be back with you tomorrow, just as we are every day, right here, Locked On 49ers.
Subscribe to this video.